Hey everyone, this is Boz Millar. I'm sitting here with Greg Johnson. You'll know him as the guy who helped write, record, and played on the song Believe by I Am Cassettes. For those who are unaware, this is a song that many of us have heard millions of times by now through the mixing contest that we just wrapped up. And I wanted to pick his brain a bit about the song, about the music industry in general, and kind of see where that takes us. So let's have at it. Just kidding, I'm not going to make you listen to it again. All right, that's better. Okay, so the reason I wanted to do this was we just did this mixing contest and we used your song, and we got way more submissions than I was expecting.
How many submissions were you expecting?
Before we started, I thought if we can get 1,000, that would mean like ultimate success.
I was thinking 250.
Yeah, and so when I counted them up in the end and it was 2,400, I thought, wow, it sucks to be you listening to all these judging it.
Yeah, it does.
At what point in the judging process did you realize that maybe like suicide was a better option?
The first week I took a look at the mixes tagged on SoundCloud, and there was maybe 150 in the first few days.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, wow, that's going well. But they all kind of came towards the end. It was really when it got crazy. And it just says 500. Like, I guess that's what the SoundCloud algorithm just says 500.
Right.
It peaks. So I remember going through it and thinking to myself, like, this feels like more than 500. Like, what would be the odds that it would be exactly 500?
Right.
So when you said 2,400, that made a lot of sense.
I mean, did you kind of regret that you had submitted the song?
No, I didn't. Although, if I would have known how, like, popular it was going to be, I might have picked a different song. But I picked that one because I thought it worked well for the needs of the contest when I first got your email. Because it was sort of it's fairly simple. Like, I think there was maybe 40 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of standard rock, a little bit of orchestration, a little acoustic guitar, a little electric guitar. So I thought it had like a little bit of everything, which would be like a pretty straightforward like approach for a contest like this. Although, I might have picked maybe like one of my own band songs if I thought if it was going to blow up this big.
I know, and honestly, I think we went through a few different songs before picking yours, because I remember like I submitted some songs, David submitted some songs, and it was like these aren't quite right. And then when I heard yours, it was obvious for the same reasons you just said. Like, this is the kind of song that basically anyone from any background would hear that song and say, hey, this is a good song, and want to mix it.
Yeah, it's fairly approachable. It's not too heavy, which I know like a lot of Dave's fans are in it for the heavy stuff, you know? But I wanted to get something a little bit more rounded, I should say.
Uh-huh. For
the everyday engineer, you know?
Now you know next time not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose it could have been worse, though, if I would have picked a worse song and you guys would have went with it.
I don't think we would have gotten as many submissions.
Oh, that's very possible.
I do believe that. I think the reason there were so many submissions is because the song was kind of an ideal for a mixing contest. I mean, I've done a lot of mixing contests. I've had songs that I've done in mixing contests. But I've never seen one get that much attention before.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I have either. Although I've only done like maybe one or two mixing contests, but I don't remember everyone getting anywhere near that kind of numbers.
Yeah,
which is good for you.
Well, yeah, kind of until we have to judge them all.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, so definitely in those terms, it was a success. But people will need to be patient to get the results because it'll take a little while.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Okay, so I guess that's enough about the song. Everyone who's listening to this has probably heard the song and it is as sick of it as we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, well, first off, tell me, what is your job? Like, what do you do?
Well, I am like a lot of people these days. I'm a little bit multifaceted, but I'm a producer down here in Temecula, California, which is
Okay.
like wine country.
Where's that?
It's like halfway between LA and San Diego.
Oh, okay, you're south of LA. Okay.
Yeah. And I also do, some mixing work. I play in a band, but I think I do a lot of sound design for other like bigger bands, and I score movies. But like probably sound design and scoring the movies is what I'm most known for.
Okay, so when you say scoring movies, like, do you tend to work with live orchestras, or do you use a lot of samples, or is it like electronic scoring?
Yeah, tons of samples. Whenever I can get a budget that allows for it, I have some string players that I use. But tons of samples. Kind of like I would say like my style is more like towards what Trent Reznor is doing currently.
Okay.
A little bit more modern approach,
Okay. Huh.
which is sort of similar to what I do with my bands when I sound design them. Just tons of samples, kind of messing with things, just trying to give like each song a little bit of a spice or a voice.
Okay, so I have a question about this. How do you know, like, when you're making sounds like that, it's not just getting in the way of the song?
Okay, yeah. So that's every like sound designer's first like step is like you sort of start going down these tangents and you start to like maybe bury the song a little bit with noise. So like I work with a couple different producers. I work with obviously Dave Bendith on some of his bands that need it.
Okay.
But I also work with another producer named Arnold Lanny on, again, like same thing, sound designing his bands. And so I got to see from those guys, like, sort of where they wanted it to stop, you know?
Okay.
But I'll give them options. I usually give them maybe a little bit more stuff than they need, and then they can kind of like make those decisions for themselves. But when I'm doing it on stuff that I'm working on, I definitely I try to be very meticulous about layering my stuff because, like you said, like you sometimes get to, like you got a pad, you add like some percussion, you add like a synth lead line. There's already like two guitars. All of a sudden it becomes sort of a mess. So I try to be very, very meticulous with what I do, where I do it. And a lot of it is just sort of like trial by error, but then also listening to guys who did it the best. And I would say, like, my ultimate sound designer is Trent Reznor.
Okay.
Obviously, like, Nine Inch Nails was all sound design, kind of, you know?
Right.
But also the guy, I think bands like Muse and Linkin Park, and actually the guy from the keyboard player from Bring Me the Horizon does a very good job.
Okay, so my next question then is it standard for bands to outsource the sound design stuff?
Yeah, it happens a lot. Sometimes we'll have bands that will do some of like the preliminary work. Like I worked with Sleepwave. Are you familiar with them?
No.
It's Spencer Chamberlain from Under Oath, his new band.
Okay.
And him and Steven, they're basically it. It's just a singer and guitar player, but they wrote all the songs, and they had a very clear idea of what they wanted for sound design. But when I came into the picture, I kind of like took their ideas and ran with it a little bit maybe further while they focused on, you know, singing and playing guitars and stuff. And then other bands don't have anything, and I kind of just throw something at them and, you know, see what sticks.
Okay.
But a lot of times, yeah, it is outsourced.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, because I think, and I'd imagine a lot of, especially home recording guys are kind of like this. They try to do everything themselves. And that is, I think, part of what makes recording so hard.
Yeah, it's not like the old days when you had like a team, you know?
Right.
And that's the same way I cut my teeth, as I did everything myself, but sort of became specialized as I went.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, because, I mean, I guess you could kind of say that I did the same thing. I started recording music, and I sort of ended up specializing in writing plugins, which is a completely different specialization.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the one thing that, I mean, everything else I did, like, it was okay, but it was kind of mediocre. But the one thing that I could do, and I feel like I could do well, was write plugins.
Yeah, and the sooner that like any person who's kind of coming up in the industry, the sooner they can get to that realization of what they do best and kind of run with that, the better off they will be, I think. But having like a few tricks up your sleeve definitely doesn't hurt, you know?
Right. Okay, so that was my next question then. So do you have like a kind of standard procedure that you use when you are doing sound design? Like, do you have a few tricks that you like to use a lot and just kind of tweak? Or are you constantly like experimenting and coming up with new stuff?
Yeah, so I kind of have to like force myself to be different every time I do it, just because I know that I'll get stuck in a rut if I don't. So constantly creating my own samples, constantly buying new samplers from cool like kind of boutique up and coming companies, and then I almost never leave a sample or like a preset untouched. I try to, screw with it as much as I possibly can. So I'm always looking for just things that kind of surprise me or like kind of take me down a road that I wasn't expecting to go down. And that's sort of the fun part of it,
Okay. So is getting new tools kind of part of that process? Like, you need like a refresh of new ideas and new tools, so that kind of helps you?
It does. Because you never know, like you can have a new sampler that kind of just sparks something in you like that you weren't expecting, or it takes you down a road like you didn't know. Just recently I bought Output Sounds Signal and Rev.
Okay.
They have really, really interesting plugin that sort of did something different than like your standard like Omnisphere or something like this.
Uh-huh.
So that was really cool, and I really got into that for a second. But again, always making my own samples to sort of ground me in some sort of like a sound, like so people will know like, oh, that's the Greg Johnson like sound design kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I notice it whenever I try to do anything sound designy to my songs. Like, I'll go down this little path for like an hour and just like tweak stuff, and in the end, it just sounds stupid.
Yeah, no, that's all part of it, though.
I don't know if I should just accept the fact that I suck at it, or if I should keep trying, or focus on other stuff that I know how to do.
I would say keep trying, like, because everybody goes down that. Like, you get it, like Omnisphere, which would be probably like the most popular sampler out there right now. Like, it comes with, I don't know, 40,000 sounds or something.
Uh-huh.
So you kind of have to like go through it, to see what you're working with, to like kind of know where you need to go later on,
Yeah.
So it's all good experimentation. Everyone has to go through that.
At what point do you just give up and say, I'm not good at this, I should focus on something else?
Well, I don't know. That's a different question for everybody.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't want to like discourage anybody from trying to do what they want to do. But if you're not having fun anymore, then maybe try something else.
Okay, so how did you get into the music industry? Because I'm kind of coming from a home recording perspective here. I feel like a lot of times, like, we feel like there's this barrier between what we're doing and what the pros are doing, and like, how do you cross that?
Oh man. So one of the producers I work with, Arnold, he says the working in the music industry is sort of a war of attrition. And he's sort of right. So the way that I got into it was I graduated college. I had a music degree, and like every other music major, you graduate and then you say to yourself, now what? So what good does this degree do for me when you can't apply anywhere? So I got a little bit lucky. I was in a band, or I'm still in a band called On Being Human, and right after I graduated college, we got signed to a label in Germany, and we flew out there to do our first record. And that was sort of like a lesson in like real life for me. So I came from, like when you come from college, everything's sort of unrealistic. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
you know? So you get thrown into the real world, and then I sort of like started to pick up, all like the reality of the situation and what it takes to be like in the industry out there, but with a little bit of luck. And I haven't had a job since then, really, other than working on music.
Awesome.
But yeah, like it's totally just constantly working and developing your craft and being faced with a lot of no's, a lot of rejections. I don't know what that barrier is. I don't know if it's almost like the barrier would be, it's not like a single line where it's like now you're amateur, you're pro. It's almost like 10 years of chipping away at things.
Right. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait, I'm in this.
Yeah, kind of. I think that's how it was for me and a lot of the people that I know.
Okay.
A little bit of luck, though.
Everything requires luck.
Yeah. Just meeting the right people, I suppose.
Right. I'm sure that's a huge part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, even how I met Dave, who is, kind of on the top as far as like hard rock producers right now. And obviously he does other things, but everyone kind of knows him for that. I had produced a band and they had got signed. And then when they got signed, they moved up to the big leagues, which would be, like Dave. And so when they brought me along to do the sound design, like I remember Dave thinking like, oh, why do we need him to do it? We can just have one of my guys, And then I did it, and I did a good job. And Dave was like, you know what? Now you're one of my guys.
Huh.
So like that was good. That was a good time. Stuff like that. Just always doing your best work because you never know who's listening.
Right. Yeah. So what projects are you working on right now?
Well, I just finished. I engineered a song for Our Lady Peace.
Okay.
Under Arnold, so that was cool. I did some sound design for Courage My Love under Dave, which is like a kind of a cool new like female-fronted Canadian hard rock band.
Okay.
So I got to do a lot of stuff for them. They were super into the sound design stuff. Just scored a movie.
Oh.
Actually, independent film called Lights out here in Los Angeles. And I'm finishing up the touches on my band's new record, On Being Human, that Arnold Lanny produced as well.
Okay.
Kind of a lot. There's a lot of little tiny other projects, but nothing really to speak of, stuff that kind of comes your way.
Okay, so when you're in a band, so you produce other bands. When you're in your own band, is like there's this weird power struggle when other people are telling you how to do things?
Yeah, so and this would be like good advice for other people, like kind of in bands that start to self-produce. Like my band had been produced and had not a great situation or a few years back. So then we switched to like self-producing, which was cool,
Uh-huh.
But sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees when you're in charge of your own stuff. Like, the same reason they don't let doctors kind of operate on their own children.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know, and you can't figure it out if it's just you. So when I met Arnold Lanny and we struck up a relationship that was sort of not based on my band, it was sort of based around the studio and working for him, I came into a situation where I trusted him, and I thought he was a fantastic songwriter. And so I asked him, it's like, hey, what do you think about these songs, like my songs? And he gave me the hard truth, and I knew he was telling me the truth. And it was sort of like kind of a realization that I needed to get produced again, even though that I'm a producer myself, because you can't learn more about songwriting if you're not working with better songwriters,
Right.
And in turn, I can't help people who I produce go further if I'm not going further myself.
Right.
So I thought of it as almost an educational experience.
Huh.
That I would end out with a great product that I believed in. I invested in myself and stuff, even when a label wasn't there at the moment,
Right.
So I think for people coming up, and it's good, self-produce, keep songwriting, but at some point you need to find somebody that you trust to help you, because you'll never break through if you're just self-contained I think.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I had another question for you, which was, why is it so hard to write good songs?
Um, because like people just don't know what they don't know. Like, um, when you write a song, like you think it's cool, like your friends will all tell you it's cool, because they have to say that.
Right.
But when you put it out and it doesn't do anything, that sort of means something. And I think a lot of people like coming up, and I'm guilty of this too. Like we would be like, oh, well, like, we just didn't know the label didn't push it or whatever. They come up with excuses of why the song didn't do what they wanted it to do.
Or you blame it on the people listening. Oh, they don't know what good music is,
Yeah.
right?
Like maybe we should take responsibility and say that, maybe we didn't write a good song,
Uh-huh.
and that it's not easy. Like you can't underestimate a good songwriter like Paul McCartney or John Lennon. It's like these people weren't lucky.
Right.
I mean, maybe there was a little luck along the way, but they were special in ways that it's more tangible than just like, oh, I wrote a song. Like they actually knew what they were doing.
Right. And it's funny. I mean, like pretty much everybody in the world, like I've been listening to music my entire life. I can hear a song on the radio and know if it sucks or if I like it, right? It takes like 2 seconds to know if I like the song or not. But when I write one myself, like it sucks and I don't know what to do about it.
So it helps to have like a producer, someone who's had hits and know what a real hit is.
Okay.
There's characteristics of that. That like if you've never had a true hit, like how would you know? How would you truly know if you had a hit,
Right.
Unless you already had one. So that's always the hard part, right? It's getting the first one.
And I think this might go back to the question before, which was kind of what's the difference between the amateur and the pro? To me, it seems like the main difference is that, I mean, amateurs just, there's a certain level of just thinking that you're doing it right and not getting real good feedback from people that really know what they're talking about.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
Huh.
That was me as well.
Interesting.
But,
I've never really thought about it that way before.
Yeah. I think everybody goes through that. Like, very, very rarely does someone like at 20 years old write a hit song. I'd say the chances of that are like winning the lottery.
Right.
So I wouldn't base my career off of that happening. Like, accidentally falling into a hit song.
Right.
Like you got to almost treat it as, a skill set, just like playing a guitar is. Like guys like Steve Vai, didn't become the best because they, lucked into playing the guitar well.
Right.
It's sort of like there's a million factors to it. And I, like I'm saying this with only a very like minor success. So I have no chartable hits myself. You know what I mean?
Right. But I listen to some of your stuff and it's like, it's good music.
Yeah. I'm hoping it is. But until I have a hit, maybe I can't say for sure,
Right.
But that's why like I hired somebody to help me.
To help you out.
Yeah. Maybe I got to that conclusion a little bit late, but just because I had been burned by a producer, and that happens a lot. I can't tell you how many bands come to me. It's like, oh yeah, we recorded with this guy and he did this, this, and this, and then he didn't give us the masters, or like just every trick, to screw somebody out of their product. I've heard and I've been through, So that's when I had to emphasize like finding someone you trust,
Okay. Are there a lot of sharks out there?
Oh, it's just awful.
Huh.
Yeah. You told like guys that just charge extreme amounts, or like the worst is when guys misrepresent themselves.
Uh-huh.
Like I've had some friends go through a situation where they thought somebody who was something that they weren't, like just because you're in the room when a big song was recorded doesn't necessarily mean you had anything to do with it.
Well, you see that on people all the time, right? They say, oh, I've worked with blah, 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 blah. And working with someone has a pretty wide range of things you could be working with them for.
Yeah, and Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, what did you do? Were
Right.
you like the guy who ran and got coffee?
Right.
Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, you weren't making any artistic decisions. So I see a lot of guys like that who like fall into awesome credit and
Uh-huh.
really like milk it to the point where they're being fraudulent,
Right.
and that kind of upsets me. I mean, we all do it a little bit. Like,
Right. It's hard. It's hard when you've worked with someone. It's hard. It's hard if you can attach a name to yourself. It's hard not to.
yeah, it is because people want to know that you're legit.
Right.
But there's definitely like a line, I think, of being, like just saying like, oh, hey, I worked on blah 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 versus like, oh yeah, like I produced blah 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 when, like
Uh-huh.
sort of lying
Right.
versus yeah, like I worked on a certain record, but what did I do? There's a line for sure.
Okay, so I have one, well, maybe not one more, but I have another question. This is kind of unrelated, but I was actually just thinking about this morning. I see bands that have like 20, 30-year careers that play the same genre their entire careers.
Mm-hmm.
Do those guys like doing that, or do they like wish they can go in and just like make a country album one day just because they want to?
Sort of like how Steven Tyler just dropped a new country single.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I've definitely seen the guys that some of that have been in like famous bands or whatever, and now they're getting a little bit older, and it's sort of just they do it because it's like a day job. It sort of became routine.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they don't have a spark for it anymore. Like, they don't play like they used to or anything, but it doesn't sort of matter because they're like legacy artists,
Right.
So I definitely see that. But then I see other bands that are trying to do something different, but are afraid that if they do that, they'll lose their base,
Right, and it's tough. I mean, because me having a fan base of about 0 people, I can wake up one day and say, you know what, I don't want to play the guitar. I want to play the piano today, and I'll write a piano song with strings and blah, blah, blah. And I can because nobody will care.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder, like, at some point when you reach a certain level of success, like, you're expected to not deviate from what you've already done. I wonder if, like, does that frustrate people? Or do they like that? Or is everyone different?
I think everyone's different, but like I'll tell you a little anecdote. I had a actually pretty famous band here at the studio, and there was a discussion going on about the direction of the song that they were working on, and they knew it. Like the singer had said, like he was talking to like the producers, like I know what you're doing, but that's three records away,
Okay.
So he's like, I have to keep one foot in what we're doing still, or else I'll lose them too quickly.
Huh.
And so that was a very he was being very articulate. He knew that was a good decision, that was being discussed, but he also knew business wise he couldn't make it yet. Like it was like sort of a gradual thing that he had to accomplish. So I thought that was kind of a very like smart like way of going about it. Like he like, definitely knew what was going on.
He knew he'd get there someday, but he knows you can't rush it because...
Yep. You go too far too quick and you can lose people. And there's bands that I've listened to that did that, and I was like, I don't care anymore.
Right. Like I do. As a listener, I want bands to not deviate, but as a player, the last thing I want to do is like make the same song over and over again.
Yeah, maybe the trick is to do it sort of over time.
Huh, okay. So I assume, like, I've seen some of the projects you work with. I'm assuming you're kind of in a nice position because you get to work on a variety of stuff.
Yeah, so like I can, I just did a country band.
Okay.
And that was a first for me, So I actually like kind of got into country a little bit there for a second, kind of figuring out what makes it all work.
Did you repent after you were done?
Yeah, exactly. There are. I definitely don't come about like I don't listen to country naturally, but I did find the ones that I did like, and that was always about the song. So I told the guys it doesn't necessarily matter how you dress it.
Right.
If it's still like a good song, like sure, let's throw some banjos on it or whatever. So, but then, and I tell the same thing to like the more like hardcore kind of guys that I work with. Like you can't just be about like a good breakdown or like it's got to be based in something more substantial than that. It has to be based in a good song. So that ultimately that's the end goal, and however they want to like play it is fine. you know.
Well, cool. All right, so before we wrap this up, is there anything that I mean, I'm putting you on a spot here, but is there any kind of advice you have for people that are trying to get into the music industry that can't quite figure out, like, common mistakes you see people make?
Yeah, I think like what we were talking about earlier is like kind of not seeking anyone's help. That doesn't do you any favors.
Okay.
It's definitely about learning as much as you possibly can. Like when I was a little bit earlier a few years back, I wanted to learn more, and I'm a Logic user. So I was seeking out like information, and YouTube's such a huge resource that I found like one guy's particular channel, SF Logic Ninja, David Earl, runs a place called Pyramid up in San Francisco, and he does awesome videos. And I must have watched, I don't know, 200 videos like from him and like some of the stuff that he had linked, and just like constantly learning, even if if I didn't know this person, but seeking, different ways to do things or different techniques. If you're a songwriter, then you gotta work with other people, other songwriters and stuff. If you're an engineer, you gotta like listen to other people's mixes. Learn like the do's and do's nots, because there was definitely some weird errors that I heard in the mixing contest. Simple stuff like sample rate, like like just people not knowing that they had to change their clock.
Right.
So like, and maybe they wouldn't know like if they're just opening up a program and they have no like base knowledge of recording. So constantly just learning. And by that, then you like network, and that's kind of like the only way to do it. I think, at least that's the only way I know of how to do it.
Well, cool. Thanks for taking the time to let me pick your brain on this stuff. Yeah, and for you listeners, go check out his stuff. He plays in a band called On Being Human, and that's all we have for you today. See ya.